Hi, I'm Mark Stevens, author of Government Indicted. The website, of course, markstevens.net. We got another call of shame, and like I mentioned on the show, this is a good one. This is good. I didn't include the entire call, and there was some edits that I had to make to this, but it's I just added names out. But this is a good one, and it's really instructive to show just how easy it is to tear apart a tax agent or a bureaucrat's argument. Really easy to do. You just have to keep focused, and you'll notice through no matter what he says, no matter how he tries to deflect the attention away from the actual question, I bring him right back, and to where we get at the end, we get a huge admission that will definitely work against them. So if you disagree with what I presented in here, you think the agent did a great job and can support. If you just think I'm wrong, then call into a live broadcast and present your evidence and your logic. I'd love to hear that, because dissent is always welcome at the No Stay Project.
So is it really your position that the Revenue and Taxation Code somehow proves that the Constitution applies to Ms. because she's in California?
Yes. Our position is laid out. If you would like to file a reply brief in response to it, you're welcome to do so. I believe that is your right, the taxpayer's right to file a reply, and if you want to clarify or frame the issues, you're welcome to do so.
Well, let me just write that down. I do want to address that. So you're just so that we, and I always like to speak to people and make sure that I have their position correct. So the code proves the Constitution applies, not the other way around. Are you sure about that?
Right. The Constitution provides the Constitution gives the FTB the authority to propose assessed tax.
Okay, so maybe you didn't understand before, because I asked you if it was your position that the code that you're quoting in your brief is proof that the Constitution applies to me because she's in California. So you're going to reverse yourself and say no, that the code is not proof that the Constitution applies, right?
Yeah, our position is stated in our opening brief. You can to the Office of Tax Appeals if you'd like to file a reply brief in response to ours.
We will. I like to make sure, again, I like to do this to make sure that I have your position. Because now during the course of the call, you kind of flip-flopped, and so now you're saying, okay, so what actual evidence, because I don't see it in your brief, what actual evidence do you present, which if in the brief, that would prove that your Constitution applies just because she's in California?
That because she's a California resident, that she has to file an income tax when she earns sufficient income? Is that what you're asking?
No, I'm asking you for the proof that's in your brief, addressing her actual position here in the in her appeal. The actual evidence or facts that you have in your brief that prove that the Constitution applies to her just because she's in California.
That the California Constitution applies to her because she's a resident of California?
No, because she's physically in California.
Right. The information that we have is that Ms. Gilroy earned income in California, had earned California taxable income, and that's the basis for our assessment.
So I went through this before with the other agents. So once you're backed into a corner about her physically being in California and the Constitution applying, you want to divert the attention away and say, well, she doesn't even have to be in California. So we just have a California source. So let me again address that. What evidence, if any, do you have in your brief that would show that the Constitution applies just because she had money in California from a California source?
What section of the Constitution?
No. What evidence or facts do you rely on to show that the Constitution applies to her, or just because she had a California source of money?
That she had a California source? Well, it's stated in our opening brief.
It's stated in the opening brief?
Yeah. The California Constitution confers legislative power upon the California legislature in the absence of a return providing information necessary to accurately determine a taxpayer's liability and power to estimate income from any available information. We received information that she had earned income for the tax year from that she had California sourced income.
But you're reading the Constitution. I get that. But aren't you assuming it applies to her in the first place?
Mr. Stevens, I think we're just going around in circles at this point. If you would like to file, our position is the same as what it is in our opening brief. If you would like to file a reply brief to state your position, you're free to do so.
We're only going in circles because let me finish. We go in a circle like that, and you guys must have like something on your cubicle to say, okay, I'm endangered, then accuse Mark of accusing of this, call him a sovereign citizen, do this. And going around in circles, what you try to do is you try to deflect the attention away from the one who's actually not being responsive and answering the questions, and that's you. And I'm given this is a good faith opportunity, to see what exactly your positions are. Now, if you're saying that there's evidence in the brief that shows that the Constitution applies to her, just reading a section of the Constitution, doesn't that just presume that your argument is already true, that you've already established that the Constitution applies in the first place?
I'm sticking by our position as stated in our opening brief. If you would like to file a reply brief in response to that and have the OTA or have the right to a hearing, you're free to do so.
We'll do that. So just again, what facts, not legal citations, what facts do you have in your brief that would show that a written instrument called the Constitution actually applies to her just because there was a California source of money?
So are you alleging that if there's nothing that would apply to if whenever we receive California sourced income, it wouldn't apply, that we wouldn't be able to tax that?
I'm asking you if you can do what the previous agents that you work with were not able to do, and support your conclusion that just because she's has a California source of money, that means or proves somehow that your Constitution and code apply. I just want to know the facts that you have claimed to have presented, because I'm looking at your brief and I don't see it.
The facts is that she received California sourced income.
Yes, we got that. That's not up for dispute. What we're disputing here is your claim that just because she has a California source of money, that your Constitution and written instrument applies to her.
That we're allowed to tax her on that California sourced income?
Let's stick to the actual question that you and your associates have all alleged the same thing, that if she has a California source of income, then your laws apply and give you jurisdiction to exact the tax. So let's stick to that. What facts, if any, are in your brief that would prove that your Constitution, a written instrument, applies to her just because she had a California source of money?
Yeah, I guess I'm just not understanding your question. I think it's laid out in our brief that we have assessment authority when we receive information that someone has California sourced income that requires them to file a tax return.
Aren't you assuming that your Constitution applies just because she has a California source of money?
Yes.
You're assuming that. And so that's the problem. That is the problem. You're assuming it, and I don't believe that based on what you and I have gone through, and especially what the agents that went before you, who would actually be called as witnesses if we have a hearing, you and they are not able to do anything more than assume. And even under the sections of the code that you cited in here, you don't have a presumption of correctness based on an assumption, right? Even I think you agree that you don't get a presumption of correctness unless it's based on facts, and the most important fact you're assuming
is that we can tax California sourced income.
That the Constitution and laws apply to Ms. just because she has a California source of money. You just said that it was an assumption on your part.
Mr. Stevens, I feel like we're not getting anywhere on this one. If you would like to file a reply brief...
You don't need to repeat that. Let me cut you off. I'm sorry. You don't have to keep repeating that. Okay. So, the basis of the assessment, the single most important part of your assessment't the law applying, and you are assuming that it does. You don't have any actual facts. So we'll put that in our reply brief. And would you at least concede that, and it's in your brief, that the Franchise Tax Board does not have a presumption of correctness if you're making an assumption that the basis of your assessment is an assumption?
I'm going to stick to our position as articulated in our opening brief. As I stated, if you'd like to file a reply brief, that is your right. Thank you for your time.
Wait. You copied and pasted in here. The FDB has to show that the proposed assessment is reasonable and rational. And if it does, the proposed assessment is presumed correct. Now, if the foundation of your assessment is by your own admission an assumption, wouldn't that then mean that you don't, according to what you wrote, this principle of law, that you don't have a presumption of correctness?
Mr. Stevens, you can file a reply brief in response to our opening brief.
So do you believe that an assumption creates a presumption of correctness?
Mr. Stevens, you can file a reply brief.
I have him in the loop now. He's not. Okay,
thank you for your time.
We pushed Brad into a loop. Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you. Have a good night.
All right.
Bye.
Thanks. Bye-bye.
I'm sorry. That was comical.
Yeah.
All right, just briefly on this video, you clearly hear the agent say, and this is a tax counsel, he clearly states that he's just assuming the foundation of their claim, which is the same as any tax claim, bureaucratic claim, that if you're in California, the laws apply. He's making an assumption by even the own code, the codes that he cites in the document. So even in where he actually, it says the FDB has to show the proposed assessment is reasonable and rational. And yeah, a better question would have been, do you believe an assumption is reasonable and rational? But I still got the point across. And the important thing here is, just like with the IRS, unless it's reasonable and rational and based on facts, due process requires it to be thrown out. Now, some may look at that and says, after the FDB establishes that the proposed tax liability is based on estimated income attributable to you, and say that is what they're doing. No, what you see, it says the proposed tax liability. To have a proposed tax liability, it has to be based on facts. Of course, it has to be reasonable and rational that the Constitution laws apply. That's the foundation of it. So I don't think that helps them out at all. So we're going to go into a hearing hopefully soon, and the problem that we have, it's not that we can't show that they're just doing an assumption. It's just that the courts and the administrative agencies, especially the tax court, the United States tax court, even when you show them that they're not entitled to a presumption of correctness, come hell or high water, they won't strip them. They will not do that, and that makes defending against these things extremely difficult. So again, it's easy to show that they don't have a leg to stand on. It's easy to get them to admit that they're making assumptions and that there's no evidence whatsoever. It's another thing because it's much more difficult to get things tossed out when it escalates, because they don't want to do that. The judges and administrating hearing officers don't want to strip judges of the IRS or a tax agency of their presumption of correctness, even though the law is very clear. It has to be the assessment has to be reasonable and rational, and no amount of the income or money sourced from California is even relevant if there isn't evidence first proving that the Constitution code apply and that they have jurisdiction to even do an assessment in the first place, because in law, relevance is king. But hey, if you disagree, again, call into a live broadcast. So till then, salute.